Okay, so this is on ratios and proportions. Okay, and this hopefully will be some review. You should have had a lot of this before. It's on ratios and proportions. First, make sure you spell it right. Okay. First, the author goes through and defines a ratio. And a ratio is a comparison of two quantities. A comparison of two quantities. And most of the time, you are used to seeing a ratio written as a fraction. A ratio A to B. Okay? You may also see it written, instead of a fraction bar, they might use a colon. It's a ratio of A to B. Okay? You can also write it with the word 2. A ratio of A to B. Okay? And in all of these, your B value cannot be 0. Remember, you cannot have division by 0. Okay? The author also talks about an extended ratio, and I'm going to give you an example here in a minute. But an extended ratio is where you compare more than just two quantities. So an extended ratio might be a ratio of A to B to C. Okay? And that might be like if I was considering freshmen to sophomores to juniors. Okay? And I'm looking at the ratio. And then I might say, okay, freshmen to sophomores, what's that ratio? Sophomores to juniors, what's that ratio? Freshmen to juniors, what's that ratio? So that's an extended ratio, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. Okay? Okay, then they talk about a proportion. A ratio is just considered one fraction. Okay? A proportion is an equation. Okay, so it's actually going to put an equal sign. Okay? It's an equation stating that two ratios are equal. The proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equal. Okay, and it might look like this. A divided by B equals C divided by D. Okay? There are a couple of special terms that they use. Okay? The B and the C, whatever's in that position, okay, they call those the means. Okay, and the A and the D, they call those two values the extremes. And you'll hear people say a lot, how do you solve a proportion? You cross multiply. That's because they look at the cross products property. They call it the cross products property, and we usually say cross multiply. Okay, and it says the product of the means. The product of the means equals the product of the extremes. The product of the means equals the product of the extremes. So the product of the means would be B times C, and you set it equal to the product of the extremes, A times D. Okay? So you cross multiply. When you're, and we're going to go through some examples and use that. When you're reading a word problem and it uses the word per, P-E-R, that is the division line. Like if I said the ratios of well, no, let's say I'm driving 70 miles per hour. Okay, if I was driving 70 miles per hour, that's like 70 miles in 1 hour. The per, P-E-R, is the fraction bar. Okay? Okay. Okay, now I want to look at a couple of examples. Okay? Put these in your notes. The total number of students who participate, in sports programs the total number of students who participate in sports programs at Central High is 520. The total number of students is 1,850. Okay. Find the athlete to student ratio to the nearest tenth. Sometimes they will ask you to go to decimals. If they don't, then you can leave it in fraction form and reduce it. Remember, reduce all your fractions. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, the order that it's written makes a difference. Okay, I want the athlete to student ratio. Okay, so when you're setting this up, it's the number of athletes to the number of students. So total number of athletes was 520. Total number of students 1,850. Okay, so now divide that out. Take 520 divided by 1,850. Okay, and you get 0.28, and all I need is 2 decimals now. It says round, and don't miss the problem because of the rounding. Round to the nearest tenth. So you look at the hundredths place. If that's 5 or greater, you round that up. Okay, so our answer is 0.3. Okay, and that's rounded to the nearest tenth. But it's not just a math problem, it's a reading problem. It's athlete to student. If I turned that around and said what's the student to athlete, then it changes the problem. Okay? Okay? Then it would be 1,850 divided by 520. Yeah. Okay? Okay, another example. Okay, in a triangle, the ratio of the measures of the 3 sides is 5, and then use a colon, 5 to 12 to 13. That's the extended, that's an example of an extended ratio. It's in that ratio. No, you're not given that one side's 5. They're in a ratio of 5 to 12 to 13. Okay? Yeah. Okay. And the perimeter is 90 centimeters. Okay. Find the measure of the shortest side of the triangle. Okay. Now, on this, we're going to use a variable, and I'm going to use x. You can use whatever letter you want. I'm going to use x as the common factor. Okay. And when you figure this perimeter of a triangle, distance all the way around, so it would be 5x plus 12x plus 13x equals 90. Okay. So if you combine like terms, should end up with what? 30x equals 90. Divide by 30, get x equals 3. And then the shortest side, 5 times 3. Yep. And if you found all the sides, 15 would be the shortest. 12 times 3 would be 36. So if we were at 15, 36, and 13 times 3 would be, what, 39? Okay, and you should be able to add those up and get 90 as a check. Okay, so this is, no, I left out a word here. This should say common factor. X is the common factor. Okay, so that's kind of an example of an extended ratio. You can use whatever letter you want there. Okay, okay, then the author is going to give you proportion problems to solve. Okay, as an example, and it will just say solve. Up in the numerator, 4x minus 5, and it's all over 3, equals a negative 26, and it's all over 6. Now, you could, right at the beginning, you could reduce that fraction on the right, make it easier. What goes into both those? Yep. Oh, not 3. What goes into both of them? They both end in 6, so that what goes into both of them? 2. 2 would go in there, right? 2 goes in there 13 times. 2 goes in there 3 times. Now you've made it a little bit smaller. Now cross multiply. The product of the means equals the product of the extremes. I don't care which way you write that. You're just going to cross multiply. If I say multiply these two together, 3 times a negative 13, give you a negative 39, and cross multiply, whoops, hang on, let me pick a different color. I don't like that. Pick a different color. Multiply this whole thing times 3. When you cross that, it's 3 times the quantity, 4x minus 5. Okay, so you've got to use, which property am I using here? Distributive. So I'd have a negative 39 equals 12x minus 15. Do the inverse, add 15. Remember, you want to solve for that x. So 12x equals what? Negative 24. And then I would divide by 12 on both sides. Divide by 12 on both sides. And x equals negative 2. Okay? And that would be your answer. And you could substitute that back in. If you substituted negative 2 back in to the, if you substitute it back in here, 4 times the negative 2 would give you negative 8, minus 5 would give you negative 13 over 3. Yeah, that checks. Okay.
Are we supposed to solve for the variable for this?
Yeah, yeah. Just solve for the variable, unless they tell you something else. Okay. Okay. Last example. Boxcar on a train. Okay, boxcar on a train has a length of 40 feet. Okay, a boxcar on a train has a length of 40 feet and a width of 9 feet. A scale model is made with a length of 16 inches. Find to width. Find the width of the model in inches. Now, I'm a firm believer when you write out a proportion problem that you ought to put it in words. We're comparing two things. On the first sentence, we're comparing the boxcar length. And I don't care if you use my exact words. Just figure out what two things you're comparing. I'm comparing boxcar length and boxcar width. And I'm comparing the model length to the model width. Okay, so in this first one, it has a length of 40 feet and a width of 9 feet. Okay, the length is 16 inches, and the width, now, instead of using an X, I'm going to use a letter that makes sense in the problem, so I'm going to use W for width. Okay, now you do the same thing. You cross multiply, so if I multiply 9 times 16, I get 144. And then cross multiply 40 times W. Okay, and then divide by 40. Okay, and it does not come out there evenly. You take 144. Does it go in exact? No other decimals? Okay, 3.6. Okay, and that would be in inches. Okay. Now, you may set this up differently. There's 4 ways for every proportion to be set up. If I set this up, on this one I set it up length to width equals length to width. Even if you don't write it out in words, at least write that much. Okay, I could also set it up length to length equals width to width. Okay, I could set it up width to width equals length to length. Or I could set it up width to length equals width to length. There are 4 ways to set up every proportion, but you have to be consistent. Okay, if I'm putting the length on top on the left, okay, over the width, I want to put the length on top on the right over width. Okay. Okay, so when you're doing your word problems, I don't want to see just the final answer. I want to see some of the work, and even if you don't write it out in words, at least give me the formula. If you're comparing cost to the number of items, write that out. C over I equals C over I. Fill in your numbers, cross multiply. You're going to need your calculators on your iPad, or you can borrow the calculators up there. Okay? Okay, that should get you started.